This segment is kind of a follow-up to my main channel segment over at timcast.net. If you haven't seen it, go to timcast.net. It's my main channel, and it was up at 4. I'll link the video in the description below, so you can just click it if you want to see it. But Donald Trump says that the U.S. will designate Antifa a terrorist organization. And although I did talk about what this means quite a bit on my main channel, and I talked about what this means beyond Antifa being a terrorist organization like Civil War, I wanted to go through some of the arguments people have about, can it be a terrorist organization or not? And what I see here, while this won't be comprehensive, is that many journalists who claim to report on these kinds of issues have absolutely no understanding of what Antifa is. Now, look, everyone's going to try and claim they know for sure, so take everyone with a grain of salt. Research for yourself. First and foremost, Antifa is an organization. It dates back to to Germany, where it was associated with the Communist Party of Germany. It was opposing the fascists, and they were overtly communist. Anti-fascists in the United States, or Antifa is a better way to put it, have a flag, have a symbol, have organizations, have merchandise, have branded cells. They name themselves after their cities or certain slogans. They certainly exist. But let's just do this. I want to show you these tweet threads. We've got Cernovich and Ryan Grimm, a journalist, and Mike Cernovich, a variety. It says filmmaker. We'll leave it at that. We also have Count Dankula and Shoeonhead talking about what this really means. There's a lot to go through. Is it dictatorial of Donald Trump to even do this? It's one of the questions I want to get to that I didn't talk about in my main video. Ryan Grimm of I believe he's of The Intercept, said, "I guess luckily for Antifa, there's no such organization." As soon as I saw this, I knew one thing. Ryan Grimm doesn't know anything about Antifa, because it's not about there being one Antifa. It's about all of the different branded cells. Cernovich responded by showing Ryan Grimm his own tweets where he specifically refers to Antifa like a group. To which Ryan Grimm says, "Of course, Antifa is a term to loosely describe anarchist protesters. How do you get from that to an organization that can be defined? Who's in it? Everybody who wears black and posts on that Reddit? That you're not outraged at the entire concept is disturbing." Cernovich said, "Let's pretend that these arguments weren't dealt with epistemically and legally with the mafia. There are group pages, member lists, email distribution, and regular figures. This is actually not a challenging issue at all, as street gang prosecutions show." Ryan said the mafia is a strictly hierarchical organization with clear rules around membership. But even with the mafia, you can't just deem it a terrorist organization. You have to make an actual RICO case. Cernovich's response: "The claim that Antifa doesn't exist, despite there being an official handbook, flag, de facto uniform/gang colors, locally branded chapters, that's giving cover to violent actors. If you want to get into legalisms, that's a separate conversation. Trump can order Treasury to prohibit banks from doing business with Antifa. Antifa could then go into court to say, we are suing for bank access even though we don't exist," which would be funny. And I believe that's the gist of where they're at so far in this conversation, but I want to point out a few things. Cernovich says that they have an official handbook, kind of. An Antifa-associated professor did write a handbook, and that may be a general ideology. I don't think it's as strong as saying it's an official handbook, like Cernovich did, but I generally agree that if the phrase Antifa makes a reference to a symbol that people tattoo on themselves, they fly a flag, they create chapters, and they have a guiding piece of literature, that literature, while not, official, still is a guiding principle that allows you to easily identify who these people are. Gang colors, I also think, is a bit strong. They just wear black as a tactic, but they do have red and black as their key identifying colors. So, The main issue here is the locally branded chapters, to which brings me to Mr. Dankula himself. You may know Count Dankula, the famous comedian and pug guy. He said, quote, "Actually, it's not an organization. It's a decentralized group of individuals who wear the same symbolism, believe the same ideology, use the same methods, use the same flag, and use terrorist tactics." He responded with another sarcastic quote, "I thought you were the freeze peach guy. I am. I'm just not a free beat people up and burn down buildings type of guy." Now, this is where we get into the argument of whether or not Donald Trump is acting like a dictator over this. The answer is no. There are problems with the Patriot Act and the designation of terrorist organizations, serious problems. But there is a bigger question at hand about defending civil rights. But first, let's read what Shoeonhead responds with. She said, I'm actually surprised you of all people are for this. I'm absolutely against any and all political violence, but you know this won't just be for people, quote, burning down buildings. This is a very slippery slope. Plus, it will affect the internet as well. It's too broad of a movement. Dankula's response is, Antifa now goes hand in hand with violence. That's the image they built for themselves. If they want to leave and form groups based on peaceful protest, I'm 100% for that. If they want to commit premeditated acts of violence, which they do, then no. I'm going to refresh this, see if they have any. There's probably a bit more back and forth here. But first and foremost, in response to Shoeonhead saying it is a slippery slope, she is correct. This is something we were all very concerned about when the Patriot Act got signed. Me, only a little bit, being that I wasn't really paying attention to politics all that much, but I did hear the arguments. They can label anybody a terrorist. Look at what qualifies someone to be a terrorist organization. It's very easy to do, and it can be nightmarish for legal groups. However, Antifa is well beyond, and I mean this as the parent tree, but I can cite some branded groups. I'm not going to name them because I want to give them any airtime, because I wouldn't do that for other terror groups either. But the branded cells have committed specific acts of violence. They have done very specific things, and they welcome people to their ranks. Simply because their ranks are loose doesn't mean they don't encourage violence, and it doesn't mean that they aren't a group. I mean, listen, they are. They have a flag, they have a symbol, all of these things. And then when they say, here's what we believe and want, and people pick up that flag, well, you're going to get charged with these things the same as any other terror organization. Imagine if somebody in the United States committed a violent act, flying a very particular flag from a particular group in the Middle East. You can go ahead and guess which that one is. The one that Trump, for the most part, just crushed in the past few years. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to say, oh, that guy waving that flag and doing this awful thing? Nothing to do with it. We've seen people try to claim that their action is taken on behalf of a certain terror group. And then they argue, well, no, not really, but kind of. This is what these terrorist organizations want. They're trying to find loopholes in the law. So let's talk about what a dictator would do. If you have a group of people that suppress the rights of others, this is an authoritarian group. If you have a police, so there's varying degrees of liberty to authority, okay? I happen to fall very, very closely to the libertarian spectrum. The reason I'm not on the bottom, which is like anarchy, no authority, is because someone has to protect and guarantee rights. Within that balance, there will be a dip towards authoritarianism, not to the authoritarian spectrum, but towards that, right? So let's say you're an anarchist and you realize you're having difficulty enforcing certain laws that protect people, like the non-aggression principle or some kind of, just generally don't attack people, be free. So you bring about a police force. Your community comes together and say, here are the rules we can all agree on so we can live together in harmony. You've now taken one more step, adding a little tidbit of authority. In this instance, peaceful protesters have come out in San Francisco, notably, and been beaten and harassed and attacked by people brandishing the Antifa flag, organized by people who have Antifa tattoos. This is all part of the public record. That guy in San Fran who got arrested, it was in Berkeley, it was in the Bay Area, had the Antifa tattoo on his chest, okay? They know what their ideology is. They know what they're supporting, and they're organizing this and emboldening and empowering people with tactics, with fundings, and they come from out of state. If you are an innocent person protesting in Berkeley and someone comes after being essentially funded and organized and helped by these other people, or at least incited to do so, you have a very real problem with people's rights being suppressed. I don't like the terrorist designation. I think it's mostly meaningless. It might be able to solve problems of funding and interstate activities, like Cernovich mentioned with banking. There are certain organizations, they have merchandise. Okay, if an individual is trying to get merchandise that flies that flag, I'm not talking about the general concept of opposing fascism. That's the lie. The Antifa people say to you, we just oppose fascism. You have a core ideology, a handbook, unofficial. I don't think it's official. I think it's unofficial. They call it official, but they share this ideology. Now you try and go and get your branded flags printed, and they say no. You try and go to sell sweaters and t-shirts. They're all black, by the way, the clothes they sell, for an obvious reason. And they say no. That's the point. To restrict the ability of a loosely knit group with various cells operating independently with real leaders and funding to be able to buy the things they buy. If you're an individual with the tattoo on your arm and you're part of these groups that goes out and supports, provides cover for, or engages in violence, don't be surprised then if the law says we will not allow you to buy these things. The difficult thing here, and the reason I don't support it, is how do you leave Antifa if you're deemed an Antifa terrorist? And that becomes very, very difficult. So while I support the general idea of if someone is known to be a part of this group, they can't buy certain things or we restrict banking or something. Think about it this way. There's a particular branded group. They have their own merch. They've appeared on mainstream TV. They go by blank city Antifa. I'm not going to say their name. What happens when all of a sudden one of their people walks into a Lowe's and says, I need these masks? They swipe the card. Wait, what was that? Swipe it again. Oh, you can't use your card anymore because you're affiliated with a group that is buying things for the purpose of committing acts of domestic violence for political gain against innocent civilians. That's the problem. So I don't know what the solution is. You can argue that stripping their funding makes sense. I don't like the idea because, think about it. Like what? Then the Antifa person can't go and buy a Starbucks cup of coffee? Hey, maybe they might throw it at somebody. What do you do? What do you do? I do not know. And that's why I think the only outcome from all of this is some kind of civil war. Because there are people who have put their hat in the ring for Antifa for the past several years. Because it was popular and safe. Boy, did they make a stupid, almost got me swearing, a stupid move. Now they have no choice. Trump says it's terrorists, and they got it in the timeline. Are they Antifa forever? The only thing they can do is keep resisting. Joe Biden's campaign funding these people. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think the short answer is you can very, very easily go after Antifa. It just means that Trump isn't going to say Antifa as a word is terrorism. It means that he's going to target the individual cell groups that are branded and have funding. These journalists don't know what they're talking about. I got a couple more segments coming up for you in a few minutes. Stick around. I'll see you all shortly.